Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. Good morning, everyone. If you weren't already up for my earlier episode this morning, I guess that is, on the Beamtown Bullies, and take my word for it, this commander is so mean. Or, okay, don't take my word for it and actually go watch the episode at some point and make the decision for yourself. But yeah, there are some incredibly brutal things that you can do with this brand new commander, and I think it's going to be a really exciting one for a lot of players, and you can take in other directions. Regardless, don't leave just yet to check out that episode, because on this episode, I'm going to be talking about a brand new Ascendancy. That's right, Maestros Ascendancy, the Grixis Ascendancy, and this thing is really powerful. I mean, just how powerful? Well, before we actually jump into it, of course, if I make any mistakes on this episode, as always, blame Eddie, because it's always Eddie's fault. Never mind, even though all Eddie does is help. Yeah, no, it's Eddie's fault, definitely not mine. Now, with that said, let's jump into it. So, Maestro's Ascendancy is an enchantment for blue, black, and red, and it says, once during each of your turns, you may cast an instant or sorcery spell from your graveyard by sacrificing a creature in addition to paying its other costs. If a spell cast this way be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. Now, that is an Ascendancy. I believe, okay, previously, and correct me below in the comments if I'm wrong on this, up to this point, back in, I believe, Khans of Tarkir, we got 5 of the Ascendancies with the other colors, I believe, what, the shard combinations, I believe those are the shards, whereas these are the wedge combinations. But yeah, I mean, right before spoiler season, I believe we saw Broker's Ascendancy, but this one really packs a punch. I mean, it is definitely up there in the power level of Ascendancies, and I think this thing is going to see a ton of play in the right decks. This essentially can allow you to exchange one of your creatures for some additional card advantage, essentially, you know, or additional, I guess, recursion kind of in a way. The ability to recast a spell from your graveyard, and yeah, that can be an instant or sorcery that can really pack a punch. I mean, we're going to go through some examples here in a bit, but first up, actually, let's go through an example of someplace we've kind of seen this almost near identical templating before, and yeah, you actually might be quite familiar with it. Because if you've got a Kess Dissident Mage deck, well then a lot of the text on that new card might sound very familiar. Kess is a 3/4 flying human wizard for 1 blue, black, red, again so in Grixis, and during each of your turns you may cast an instant sorcery card from your graveyard. If a card cast this way put in your graveyard, exile it instead. I mean, that is near identical what copy-paste for the Ascendancy, essentially, except obviously they added in that, you know, you have to sacrifice a creature in addition to paying its other cost to actually do that. But still, yeah, Kess is an incredibly powerful commander for a reason, and now we have an enchantment that essentially does the exact same thing. Now, this enchantment does have somewhat of a downside, but is it really? I mean, sacrificing a creature in some circumstances, yes, is a bad thing, but if your deck already kind of wants to do that, well, there are plenty of decks out there like, you know, aristocrat-style strategies that actually benefit from sacrificing creatures and actually want to do so. So you can get some extra value from this enchantment that is making you sacrifice a creature to actually get a spell back, you know, and be able to cast it again. And yeah, I just checked really quick on EDH which I probably should have checked before, but Kess is the 26th most popular commander of all time currently, so yeah, this effect can be in high demand as well, just as Kess is in high demand, because obviously it's incredibly powerful. Now, to fuel this brand new Ascendancy, obviously you need creatures, but again, like I mentioned, there are actually creatures out there that actually want to be sacrificed with things like, Reef Worm or Chasm Skulker or something like Pawn of Ulamog. Reef Worm has, when it dies, create a 3/3 blue fish creature token with, when this creature dies, create a 6/6 blue whale creature token with, when this creature dies, create a 9/9 blue kraken creature token. This card always reminds me of Qui-Gon's quote, at least I believe it was Qui-Gon who said this, but there's always a bigger fish, or something like that. Yeah, essentially, the more and more times you sacrifice, this or the token that it creates, the bigger it's going to get, eventually becoming a 9/9 token. So on this 4-mana card, first up, in combination with Maestros Ascendancy, you can essentially, if you really want to, keep sacrificing those tokens, once per turn on each of your turns, to actually utilize that, 4 times from one card to be able to cast spells from your graveyard. Now, obviously, you might want to keep that massive Kraken or Whale around, but do what you want to do. And of course, another card that can make even more tokens, though, is Chasm Skulker, which is a 1/1, but it has when you draw a card, put a +1 counter on Chasm Skulker. On top of that, when it dies, you're going to create X 1/1 blue squid creature tokens with Island Walk, where X is the number of counters on Chasm Skulker. Obviously, in these colors, you're going to have absolutely no problem drawing cards, so draw a ton of cards, get this thing absolutely massive, and then when you're ready for it, well, just utilize that Ascendancy to sacrifice this, not only for value and being able to recast an instant or sorcery from your graveyard, but also for the incredible value of just popping it and getting a ton of tokens. Which you then can, either use to swing out on an unlucky player that has an island, obviously, or, also just keep using those tokens for more and more value in sacrificing them to be able to cast spells too. And of course, in these colors, there are also those aristocrat-style death triggers that can be incredibly impactful, like the one on Pawn of Ulamog. It says, whenever it or another non-token creature you control dies, you may create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token. It has sacrifice this creature, add colors to your mana pool. So of course, if you've got creatures that actually benefit you when they die, like again, Reef Worm or Chasm Skulker, great. But now with Pawn of Ulamog also in play, you benefit again when that actual, non-token creature dies. You make another token, being an Eldrazi spawn. Which, of course, you can either use for mana or, obviously, again, utilize with Maestro's Ascendancy to help you cast another spell. And speaking of casting spells, we can also make creature tokens in that way as well with something like Tauren Sky Summoner. It has, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying. So, with this kind of a deck, you can obviously build up an army pretty quickly, and you can utilize that army to smash your opponents, because obviously these Drakes have flying, and of course on top of that, again, just great fodder for that Ascendancy to be able to recast spells to make you another Drake. Speaking of which, there's Sedgemoor Witch. Anyways, Sedgemoor Witch has Ward, pay 3 life, so again, that's some nice protection right there. But more importantly, it's got Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token with, when this creature dies, you gain 1 life. So again, you benefit from casting your spells, whether that's again, from your hand or from your graveyard again, thanks to Ascendancy, by making those 1/1 tokens. And of course, when those pests die, you also benefit again by gaining life. So yeah, sacrifice those tokens to your heart's content and cast more spells from your graveyard to make even more pests. And of course, in these colors, there are also just some nice repeatable token generators like Goblin Assault, which says at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token with haste. And on top of that, it also says goblin creatures attack each combat if able, which normally would kind of be a downside if you actually want to keep those tokens around. But again, with this kind of a, sacrifice creature strategy, utilizing Ascendancy, you actually can just say, well, okay, before combat, I'm just going to utilize that token to be able to cast something from my graveyard. So yeah, there are plenty of ways to make a ton of tokens so that you can fuel your Ascendancy very easily. And speaking of fuel, of course you can utilize things in a fantastic way with your Ascendancy, like rituals, which, you basically just cast, make a lot of mana, and then again, because you're going to sacrifice a creature to basically recast from your graveyard, make even more mana. So first up, with a simple example, let's talk about Dark Ritual. It's an instant for a black that adds black, black, black to your mana pool. So you pay 1 mana to make 3. So cast it, make 3 mana, essentially netting 2. Then you just recast it from your graveyard by sacrificing a creature, and you essentially just net 4 mana for casting a spell twice. And of course, again, you get any of those Magecraft triggers or Tauren triggers, etc., etc., etc. Then, of course, you can make even more mana with Jessica's Will, which is actually starting to get pretty expensive, I believe. I think it's starting to see play in competitive, or it has been seeing play in competitive. Regardless, I'm no expert on that. Anyways, it's like $15 at this point, and for good reason. It says, choose one if you control a commander. As you cast a spell, you may choose both. Add red for each card in target opponent's hand, or exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. So, yeah, if you've got your commander, well, you can make, well, let's say some opponent has, what, 7 cards in hand, maybe? Okay, 7 mana just by paying 3 to do that, and you get access to the top 3, then you do that again. So you just net, what, 8 mana, basically, from casting this twice and top 6 cards of your library? Yeah, that can be very impactful. And speaking of which, of course, we're talking about very impactful ritual spells. Mana Geyser is a fantastic one in Commander. It says add red for each tap lane your opponents control. So yeah, the later the game goes, the more tap lanes your opponents probably have. And this thing can add upwards of like 15 mana or so each time. So have fun with all that mana, especially when you recast it from your graveyard by sacrificing a creature with Ascendancy. Of course, by utilizing these kind of ritual effects, you can obviously speed up your game plan, but you also can just lead to some absolutely massive plays out of nowhere. And speaking of some pretty massive spells, obviously some other ones that you can utilize, to make a lot of tokens might be cards like Rise to the Tides or Army of the Damned. Rise to the Tides is going to make a tap 2/2 black zombie creature token for each instant sorcery card in your graveyard. Now, obviously, be careful with this one. There might be some synergies with this kind of Ascendancy where you might want to mill cards into your graveyard to essentially kind of give you access to them. But obviously, if you just keep exiling more and more cards from your graveyard, you're going to be losing out on a lot of tokens with this. That being said, obviously, casting it twice can still make you a good amount in most situations. And speaking of making a massive amount, obviously, Army of the Damned, 13 tap 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, doubled, casting from your graveyard again. That would be, what, 26? Obviously, you can just normally cast this from your graveyard again with its flashback, but technically you are saving 2 mana, at the exchange of actually sacrificing a creature for that Ascendancy. So if you can spare, one of those 13 zombies that you just made, great, you save 2 mana, so most situations, you're probably going to do that. That being said, obviously some other massive spells that you can cast and really take advantage of with this Ascendancy are those extra turn spells that don't exile, which they should. All extra turn spells should probably exile, but yeah. Time Warp does not, neither does Time Stretch. Time Warp is going to give target player an extra turn for this one. You're most likely going to choose yourself, obviously, each time, and recasting it with Ascendancy. 2 extra turns is usually going to do the trick for you to set yourself up to win the game. Speaking of which, Time Stretch says target player takes 2 extra turns after this one. And yeah, 4 extra turns by recasting them from your graveyard will get you there the vast majority of the time. But of course, you don't need to spend a ton of mana to actually have a massive impact. I mean, just cast Blasphemous Act, and then cast it again from your graveyard. It's going to basically cost, just a red mana because it costs 1 less for each creature on the battlefield, and it's going to deal 13 damage to every creature. So, wiping the board once and then having it easily accessible in your graveyard thanks to Ascendancy by just, having to get 1 more creature back into play and sacrificing it to recast this for probably just 1 mana again, it can be a great insurance policy. And of course, there are plenty of other fantastic instants and sorceries that, can be massive and that I could bring up that you'd love to cast again, but there's only so much time in the day. And of course, you can also just go get whatever ones you want, because in these colors, you've got access to a lot of fantastic tutors like Solve the Equation and Diabolic Tutor. Solve the Equation says search your library for an instant or sorcery card, reveal it, put in your hand, then shuffle. So great, go get the exact card that you want. Oh, and then you can actually, again, do this again by sacrificing a creature to recast with Ascendancy. I think I've said that phrase a couple times in this episode. Anyways, Diabolic Tutor. Search your library for a card, put that card in your hand, then shuffle your library. Obviously, this can go get you whatever card you may need. So if you need that token generator, if you need that high value instant sorcery, that ritual effect, go get what you need, and then you can just do it again, with Ascendancy. Now, when it comes to commanders that might want to consider Maestros Ascendancy, the very first one that came to my mind was Marchesa the Black Rose. Marchesa has Dethrone and says, other creatures you control have Dethrone. Whenever a creature you control with a +1 counter on it dies, return that card to the battlefield on your control at the beginning of the extend step. Now, Marchesa can be built in a couple of different ways, but many Marchesa decks out there really utilize either creatures that have, massive ETBs or LTBs, and you want to get a counter on that creature and sacrifice it and get it back out, or, maybe you've got some threaten effects to take advantage of your opponent's creatures, getting them, swinging with them, getting a counter on them, then sacrificing them to actually keep that creature permanently. So having a high value, essentially sacrifice outlet with that Ascendancy, which can help you recast spells from your graveyard, like, those threaten effects if you really want to do that. Yeah, there's a lot of potential for this kind of a commander. Another one, of course, is Anala Archmage Ritualist, a 4/5 human wizard that has Eminence. Whenever another non-token wizard enters the battlefield under your control, if Anala is in the command zone or on the battlefield, you may pay 1. If you do create a token that's a copy of that wizard, that token gains haste, exiling in the next end step. So Anala is great at providing you a ton of value through your wizards. Again, she can just even be in your command zone when that happens, and you just pay the 1 to make a copy. And of course, with that copy of the wizard that you made, it's going to go away anyways, so maybe sure attack with it if you really want to, or if it's a big wizard you can get through. But most likely, just with the Ascendancy, you can even just sacrifice it for that value to help you recast a spell from your graveyard. Next up, another commander that I definitely think might want to look at this Ascendancy is Obeka, Brute Chronologist. Obeka is a commander that can really play with time. She has the player whose turn it is may end the turn, and you can do some pretty wacky things on your own turn with this. Basically playing with, okay, something would leave at the end step, but instead, now we're just going to stop that, or, take an extra turn after this one. If, at the end of the turn you lose the game or whatnot, you're like, no, I'd rather not. So yeah, you can take advantage of even more extra turn spells in this way, and of course, you can take advantage of those extra turn spells even more by utilizing Ascendancy to cast them again, and then another one, and then that one again. And you see where this is going. And actually, the last commander that I want to bring up, depending on the build, is Ramos Dragon Engine. Now, I have mentioned Ramos quite a few times during the spoiler season already because of the charm cycle, and like I mentioned those episodes, there are just decks out there, players who have built just charms Ramos decks that just put every single charm in them that they can, because they are efficient spells that have a good amount of colors. Again, Ramos has, whenever you cast a spell, you get a counter on Ramos for each of that spell's colors, and by removing 5 counters from Ramos, you have double work to your mana pool, activate only once each turn. Obviously, like the charms, the Ascendancies are also efficient, and, basically, 3 mana for 3 colors, so you can get counters on Ramos very quickly. Again, not for all Ramos decks, but again, this is a very powerful Ascendancy, and I think it can see some play in Ramos decks because it can help you recast those charms for even more counters on Ramos. But now it's time for me to wrap things up and give you my final thoughts on Maestros Ascendancy. Yeah, this has got to be one of the most powerful Ascendancies we've seen so far, and in my opinion, definitely the most powerful one that we've seen so far this spoiler season. This thing just packs a punch. I mean, it's basically, again, Kess on an enchantment, and again, Kess is what, did I say 26th, 25th, whatever, most popular commander of all time. It's powerful for a reason, and this one, again, has a slight downside, which actually might be an upside for many decks out there. Having to sacrifice a creature is not always a bad thing, and again, if you've got an aristocrat-style strategy, that can benefit you even further. And of course, the fact that this is an enchantment and not on a creature like Kess, well, it's more protected in a lot of scenarios. And yeah, if you cast Blasphemous Act, you're not going to get rid of your Ascendancy, so cast your Blasphemous Act again later in the game for just 1 mana. Again, this can help you do some really powerful things. I think a lot of players are going to be really excited about it. But of course, there are even more exciting spoilers that are going to be coming out, and yeah, there are going to be more quick takes, and yes, there's going to be more coffee involved. And if you haven't seen some of my previous episodes from the spoiler season, make sure you check those out when you've got some time. But yeah, looking forward to the upcoming spoilers. And now I'm going to go brew another cup of coffee. And with that, the show has come to a close, so it's my turn here from you. So in the comments below, let me know your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.